Hi folks, welcome to another B29 restoration project. This time we've got the person who's responsible for all of this madness with us. Say hi, Thomas.
Hi.
So here we got the right wing panel out of storage, and we're gonna start just kind of getting it ready to start sanding off all the paint. This wing is the worst of the two. You can see it's got a good bit of wing skins that have already been removed. This fuel tank unfortunately ruptured during the accident and leaked gasoline inside the wing, so it's unfortunately melted a good bit right here in this area. And then the worst bit of it is there's a stress crack that comes all the way out to here, then makes a nice little 45-degree turn, which I can almost guarantee you is right where the wing skin seam is, and then it comes back here to this corner of the aileron. There are some hardwood that look like spruce 1/4 inch by 1/2 inch spars in it, so thankfully those are there. The airplane does have a little bit of torsional issues right now, just because things are not exactly how they're supposed to be, and this large chunk of the leading edge is removed, but all that will come and get fixed in time. See here, we've got the top part of the nacelle is pretty banged up. Again, we'll fix that in time because we plan on replacing this whole area here anyway with something a little bit more curvy and more scale-like. So now that we've kind of talked about the top side, bottom side is very similar, just big pieces of material missing, but overall the bottom is not too bad. So now we're going to worry about getting this thing ready to sand all this paint off of it, and for now we'll just we'll set the camera back here in the background and we'll get to work taking this thing apart. Didn't really miss a whole lot. The only thing we did is a whole lot of sanding. The kid decided he wanted to go upstairs and play some video games after a couple of hours of sanding, so I figured he deserved it for a job well done. So what we got here, back to the right wing panel. Like we showed you a little bit of the damage and some of the cracks before we started sanding on it. Now that we've got it sanded, we can get a little bit better idea of just how good or just how bad it is. So here we had that crack we saw, which sure enough starts pretty much right here where some wing skins had been joined. It goes down the grain of the sheet till it gets to another joint, and then it comes down where they have been joined again, and then here you see it basically come straight across to the trailing edge, or straight back to the trailing edge, and the crack's there. So this we'll have to get situated. Probably what we'll end up doing is we'll probably replace this sheet from, I'm gonna say probably about here, and then kind of center a 36 inch or a 24 inch wide piece of sheeting right there on that crack. This sheet up here, since it's on a seam, we probably won't worry about it too much. The one here where it comes across the grain, we'll figure that out as time comes. With how things are, let's see here, right here, see we have a line that I believe, yeah, it's just a score line from where they cut this out, and then we have another one here. Since we need to replace a good bit of sheeting across that, we'll probably just carry a line straight across here all the way to the wing root, and we'll have this whole thing here as one piece of sheeting, and then the next forward sheeting will bring it further out, probably all the way up to the leading edge, and then where it's cracked here at the grain, we'll probably just inject some Gorilla Glue. We'll strap the wing from leading edge to trailing edge and to clamp it, and then go with that. Same thing very much here at the leading edge. There's a lot of torsional rigidity that's been lost due to the melting of the foam and just the big gash here on the leading edge. You can see here we also have a crack at this root wing rib. I'm going to use this plywood one to use it as a template for replacement ones. I'm going to cut some ribs here, or cut a blank for the rib, just a rectangular piece, and then it'll have these holes already cut into there, so we can just slide it on there with the tubes. We can trace it, we can cut it out, and we'll be good to go with that. Same thing like we're saying here with the gash. We've lost a good bit of rigidity here. We're going to leave this gash here so we can actually get the airplane or the wing kind of compressed back together using that little jig mechanism we used on the other wing panel. We'll get the tubes here on this in place to sit there and make sure that dimension does not change, and we'll take a ratchet strap, same thing here. We'll just strap it front leading edge to trailing edge to compress it really well, and then we'll inject some of that Gorilla Glue in places just to kind of expand into the foam areas as much as possible to get it all glued back together. This is all melted from a fuel tank rupture. I assumed that it was the gas tank for the engine that was here, but I pressure tested that and it holds pressure, so the only other tank that could have ruptured for this was the smoke system, which is typically which is mounted here on the underside of the nacelle, and oddly enough, the only place where it's melted is up here on top. So I'm not sure what caused this to melt, other than it was some sort of fluid. I did order some 2-part pour foam. I got 3 pound density stuff. That's the lightest I could find. So in order to repair into here, we'll I will get some of this skinned foam off the top of it, and then I'll probably just go in here with like an 8 or a 10 penny nail and just perforate it, and then pour that pour foam over there, let it expand, and then we'll shape it and then resheet it. One thing about the nacelles that I'm not a big fan of is the bottom is a nice flowy shape. The tops are what we will call not. They are more of a triangular shape, and I'm not a big fan of that. They should be more flowy, kind of like the bottom is, where it's a nice gentle contour, a curve there. So one thing I'd plan to do, my son, he's not the builder, but he is definitely one to get me into these big projects like this one, but he's learning. So one thing I would like to do is kind of make this a little bit more of a scale shape to it. So that's one thing we're going to do. This nacelle and at least one other one, if not 2 other ones, are damaged on the top side, so I got to do 2 of them, or 2 or 3 of them anyway, so you might as well just go ahead and do all of them. Original plan was to carve this out of some foam and then make a very lightweight mold out of fiberglass to just make fiberglass ones. Honestly, I think I could probably do it out of balsa just as quickly, but we'll see. It kind of really depends on the shape of the wing, because it does change with the taper of the leading edge and then the thickness of the wing, so it may be easier just to do it out of balsa. But we'll figure that out later on. So we talked about the crack here. We talked about the leading edge. That's pretty much the most significant stuff that you can see on the top of the wing. The bottom, it's a little bit more of the same, a little bit different. So we'll roll this thing over and we'll talk about how we're going to tackle this one. So here we've got a crack that runs pretty much right here to this inner bay, which I'm going to delete. We don't need to have this one with the radio system we're going to use, but there's a crack that runs right down through here and terminates there. And there is also a nice wide piece of 1-inch fiberglass tape that kind of ran right down through here. Just under there's a crack that had already been repaired at one point, and I believe this crack started all the way here, and it kind of just followed its way all the way down the glue joint for this piece of trailing edge balsa for the aileron hinge stock. It's still got the fiberglass tape there in the areas. This area was very well bonded with that fiberglass tape and the epoxy. This side not so much. This side really started chipping off as I started sanding in it, so it definitely needed to be removed and looked at again anyways. One thing that's typical for anything with square corners, especially, well, pretty much anything with square corners that has any sorts of stresses going on off and on, they typically crack in the corners. So when it comes to doing cutouts like this, it's just balsa wood. I'm not a fan of it. You can see right here, there's a couple of cracks in these corners. I like to take a piece of 1/8 inch plywood, light plywood, and put rounded edges on it and then inset it into the balsa wood. It just helps keep things like these cracks from happening. Again, it's personal preference. There's absolutely nothing wrong with this method. It's just the method that I'm not a fan of. Something that we can very easily change. So again, nacelle, quite a good bit of damage here on the bottom of this one. It's damaged, but it's usable. It's definitely savable. There's a couple of pieces really, that the one here that kind of opens up the hatch or frames the hatch opening. We can put that together pretty easily and then just put just a strip of balsa on the backside to reinforce it. Here we can see again, here's a crack right here in that wing. Same thing we were talking about on the top. Probably drill some fairly deep holes here, quite a numerous amount of them. And then we'll get some Gorilla Glue on our long syringe and we'll just go down in there, inject some Gorilla Glue, ratchet strap it all together, leave it to dry and cure. And then this will probably, doing that, should bring this whole piece back that just 32nd of an inch that it needs to really join back in. And then we can kind of glue all this back together. Glass over it, get the rest of this, or I should say, bring it back together, thin CA it, get the rest of this primer or this paint removed from it. A little bit of body work, glass over this whole nacelle, and that nacelle should be mostly savable from what you see. Again, just like the other wing panel, this plywood wing root will most likely get completely replaced. This one is really in pretty good shape. There's only one little area here. I may get some high saw and just high saw that in there and just leave this wing root rib here where it's at, because it's way more work to remove it if it doesn't really need to be, especially with just one little crack here. And once everything's glued back together, it should be pretty good. Coming here, leading edge again, for it to have a gasoline leak way up here, which the tanks don't leak air, so they're either a very, very, very minute leak or they don't leak at all. But if you would think if it had a gasoline leak, it would be everywhere, but it's just on the top side. So anyways, foam here is in pretty good shape. There's some areas here that are missing. Again, we get that whole thing kind of sucked back in and glued in. We will, very similar to here, we will splice in a nice big leading edge spot. I'll probably cut it here, then I'll do another one there, so it's kind of a trapezoid shape. Make it a pain to get in there, but we'll just slide it in from the back and it'll lock itself in there. We'll leave that to dry, and then the whole bottom side of the skin from here out to the wing root, just like the top side, will get kind of spliced in there, which with how this nacelle is kind of messed up on both sides, we may rebuild it, but I'm going to try and save as much of it as I possibly can. Here, just like on that other wing panel, nice big crack that goes from the wing root all the way to basically the rib here, which supports the outer portion of the wing tube socket, which you can actually see the wing tube socket down inside there some. So overall, this wing is in better shape in some ways than the other one, and in a lot of ways a lot worse. It's not as bad as I originally was thinking it was with the melted foam on the top, so it's definitely savable. It's just how much more do we find when we really start kind of getting in and doing the surgery aspect of this thing. But I'm not expecting anything substantial to change to where I think we'll have to replace the wing core and the wing completely on this side. So trying to use as much of the original airplane as possible. I don't want to have to replace anything substantial, because it will just add a significant amount of time to the project. Timeline for this one is not really a timeline. It gets done when it gets done, but ideally we would like to see it flying for the 2025 flying season, so we can get out with a couple events and really kind of share this thing and get it back doing what it does best. So for now, I am going to go get some dinner and relax after a day out in the sun and sanding on this thing with the kiddo. So y'all have a great evening, and we will see you next time.